All right, welcome to another episode of the Vets and Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Will Curtis, and I am joined by a fellow CCIM this episode to talk about things in the commercial sector and what that transition looked like. So, James, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for being willing to join us.
Absolutely. I'm very happy to be here.
So, James, tell me, what is it you did while you were in the service?
So I joined the Marine Corps right out of high school, and I went infantry. So I was a machine gunner. It's an 0331. So basically, I was trained on the 50 cal, the MAR 19, and the 240 Golf. So that was my job basically in the Marines. So it doesn't translate too much into real estate in an aspect of machine gunnery, but at the same time, it definitely taught a lot of good life lessons.
Yeah, I mean, I was sitting there. I was a 50 gunner when I was in the Army, and I was like, yeah, I don't know if that one, I don't know. There's a lot of transition. There's some deals I wish I had the 50
Yeah.
to come back with. But so, you had a career that really didn't transition well into many civilian jobs. Did you find there were things from your time in the Marines that transitioned well for you?
Oh, absolutely. And one of the best things I ever did was join the Marine Corps. I joined, like I said, right out of high school, went to boot camp, went to School of Infantry, and my first duty station was Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. And that was, that was the late 90s. So
Okay.
basically, I was 19 years old, and everyone's there for just a year, right? So my job was Marine barracks. So we guarded the fence line. And mostly it was, just lance corporals, PFCs, just kind of what we call non-raids. We had one sergeant, one corporal, and a captain, and that's all we had on our side of the base. Guantanamo has two sides. I was on the smaller side. So, in that time, here I was, at one point 19 years old, toward the end, and I had, I believe, 9 Marines under me. We'd have real life situations occasionally that would, call for a reactionary force. And I'd have a tow gun and a 50 cal cat team basically, and I was still a kid. I couldn't even drink legally at the time. So those kind of things and that the leadership skills that taught really was just something that's invaluable. And I think anyone in the military sees that, where it's just that leads to every which way in life, especially at that young of an age.
Yeah, that's always been one interesting thing. I don't think many civilians understand, and I think many veterans miss, is how much responsibility is thrown on you as quickly and early as it can be.
Okay.
So I remember when I got out after 6-ish years, going to university, and we're working on your elevator pitch. So I walk in, I was responsible for $2.2 billion worth of aircraft and aircraft material, blah, 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 going through the whole thing, and basically sounded like my NCOER. And the judge or whatever, the professional, is like, you were in the military. You don't have to lie about your service. And I was like, I'm not. He's like, you're still young. There's no way they trusted you with billions of dollars worth of equipment. I was like, well, an Apache costs $30 odd million. There was, how many of them? I walked through the math, and she's like, wow, you really had that much responsibility. And I think there's sometimes that for the military, that's normal,
Yeah.
but our civilian counterparts don't get that level of responsibility at 19, leading a squad of Marines. It's a lot of responsibility. Granted, not hostile, but definitely not the friendliest country to the U.S. that you were in.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. I mean, people can't really, they didn't have the same experiences that we did in the military.
Mm-hmm.
So, a lot of times they can't translate that, but then again, I mean, that's just one of the things that helps us so much when we do, transition out of the military, that just, sets us kind of, in an aspect that it just gives us that leg up, among other people. After I was in Guantanamo, I was stationed in Camp Peddling, California, which was a line platoon, or basically a weapons platoon, and we were attached to a line platoon with the 240 Golf, and then went to Australia and Korea and Okinawa. But I was in, 96 to 2000, so it was all peacetime, so never any
Mm.
combat or anything like that. But yeah, the transition out was good, and same with you. I went to the University of Memphis right after, and one of the things also in the military that really helps, and I don't think this is really talked about as much, but the camaraderie.
Mm.
I mean, you, especially in the infantry, like we had a machine gun section and all of us were really, really close, and there, you would go out in the field together, you would, deploy together, on the weekends you hang out together, and you had that camaraderie. And it really was something that I think a lot of veterans, look for when they get out. And I did,
Yeah.
I went to the University of Memphis, and I joined a fraternity right out of the Marines. So I went from being a, non-commissioned officer, into the pledge class president of my fraternity. So that, but, it was kind of crazy, but at the same time, it was that camaraderie, and I'm a firm believer in, it takes a village, number one,
Mm.
but number two, in especially in commercial real estate, it really is it really is an aspect of, it, kind of who, in a lot of ways, because you have a lot of the times the same clients that you are going to have a relationship with, you know for a long time. Like I have people I represent that are buyers that we do several deals with, or even if, in leasing, I'll have an owner who for years and years will work together in leasing a shopping center or a strip center or anything like that. So it really is a relationship business.
Yeah.
So, I think transitioning out and going to different organizations is something that really, in my case, really helped me out tremendously.
Yeah. So I want to go back to, the non-commissioned officer, and then a few months later, you're a pledge class president for fraternity. Like, what did leadership look like differently coming from the Marines to a fraternity or a fraternal organization? Like, leadership is obviously different. So, in full honesty, I was the vice president of our pledge class, so I completely get what you're
Oh,
going
great.
through. But what, how is leadership different from positional like the Marines to this voluntary organization?
Especially, a fraternity and just how that is, so, right, people, my pledge class were all right out of college, right out of high school,
Uh-huh.
excuse me. And they were, in college to have a good time, and, all of us were freshmen, but at the same time, I had to really adjust my leadership style going from, an infantry Marine to, and at first it kind of was tough, but it ended up pretty well. My pledge brothers and I are still pretty close. I have a couple that are still here. But I found a lot of similarities between fraternity and, and the Marines. The same guys you're hanging out with, you're
Yeah.
still going out and having a good time with. You're just not really PTing with them, but are deploying any kind of machine guns or anything like that. But leadership style really, you adapt into more of a, persuasive style,
Mm.
because, I think the two tenets of leadership, in the Marine Corps, at least, you have authoritative and you have persuasive, and the best way is kind of in the middle. So, in just in life, I've found that you have to really be in the middle. But when it came to that, it was all persuasive. It wasn't. I couldn't get everyone to get up and do the stuff,
Yeah.
um, but yeah, it's still yeah, you're right. It definitely was a change.
Yeah. No, it's definitely unique. And I think it's sometimes, I joke oftentimes that you can't tell civilians to do push-ups, right? So you really are drastically changing, especially as a young non-commissioned officer, right? As a young
Hmm.
non-commissioned officer, you only know authoritative. That's all you know. That's all you're really given. And then you're starting to figure out the persuasive side of things. You're starting to figure out those aspects. But the easiest way from day one, I would imagine, especially in something like the Marines, it's all about, hey, I'm the sergeant, I'm the corporal, go do it. And we had the same thing in the Army. So it's an interesting, I found it to be one of the more interesting parts of the journey of transitioning, is just realizing how different leadership really is depending on the organization.
Absolutely. But one of the good things also, and being in the military, and I know especially being a Marine Corps is kind of a fraternity. When you're out, you're always a Marine. If I run
Right.
into a guy, he could be 90 years old. He has a Marine Corps hat. I'm going to talk to him, or meet buddies and brothers and that kind of thing. And the same thing for the fraternity. And I found that it's being a part of organizations in life really helps you out. And I've joined, I don't know how many organizations I'm a part of now, but I try to get involved and go in leadership positions, and that's actually how I got into commercial real estate. To be totally honest, through one of my fraternity brothers. So that commercial, a little bit different from residential, in the fact that it's harder to get into a lot of times. It's residential a lot of times is kind of the entry point that you kind of go in, but commercial a lot of times it's a tough thing. Sometimes people are the kids of somebody already in it. It's so for me, who had really no background. I had a background in sales pretty heavily, but that's kind of how I broke into it. So
Yeah, so that wasn't part of the goal. Let's get out of the Marines. Let's go to college. Let's go be a commercial real estate broker. That wasn't the plan at all.
not at all. I mean, I was actually a history major when I went to college.
Hmm.
So, my goal was originally law. But when I got into college, basically, I got into sales initially, and I worked for AT&T for several years. And I did have an idea to go into commercial real estate after that point. But with with AT&T, after a couple of years, I'd become I had the number one position in like the West Tennessee and Kentucky, and on top of that, also, I mitigated into helping, basically small businesses and that kind of thing. So, when I actually, it's kind of a funny story. I went from there. I worked for a radio station for quite a while, basically selling airtime. But I was doing what's called an event development for a company that did festivals. And I approached one of my fraternity brothers, whose wife had just inherited a local boutique firm in Memphis that had quite a bit of listings and had a really good reputation. I approached her about sponsoring a festival we were having. And she ended up interviewing me. I didn't know she was interviewing me, but it turns out she offered me the position. That was 9 years ago. And that was how I, came into commercial real estate. So I kind of, there's a book that I love. Robert Greene wrote a book, that was called Mastery. And he's the same author as the 48 Laws of Power, but Mastery is a fantastic book. And he has different approaches to mastering your vocation. And the one that I most, most see myself kind of as was called the hacker approach. I've always been good with people. I've been, good at sales. I've enjoyed helping people. I enjoyed kind of the servant leadership. And that's basically how, I came into commercial real estate. Now from there, I, went to, kind of branched off to the more, flagship company. And then now I'm with kind of a mixture of flagship boutique, kind of firm here. But that basically is how it works. I didn't, I transitioned basically from the military into sales, and over time got into real estate. So it's kind of almost a culmination of different approaches of sales. So
now you mentioned different brokerages, and I think that's one of the things that a lot of times, especially whether it's residential, commercial, whatever the case happens to be, it's usually one of the questions a lot of our transitioning veterans ask is like, well, what should I be looking for in a brokerage? What's the pros? What's the cons? Should I be at a CBRE or should I be at a local real estate firm? What you having been in kind of boutique, flagship, and now a kind of quasi there in the middle, what are the pros and cons, I guess, of each of them? And if you were coming back in or advising somebody coming in, where would you push them towards, if any?
absolutely, and I tell you, I had the really best situation. Boutique firm had that originally, was a part of, had close to about 60 listings. And the principal broker, she couldn't do all the listings. And most of them were C properties. So there were areas that, areas of town that were, usually lower economic areas. So I really cut my teeth in those kind of places. So I started out with listings that basically I had that were company listings that I worked with a broker. So I was mentored, to learn the craft. And commercial is, you really need a mentor in commercial because it's just, there's so much to it. And you're really, there's a lot of times so much money in it, and there's so many things that you could, do wrong. You want to make sure that you're representing your client properly. Sometimes we see people that are maybe in a different form of real estate that try to get into commercial with no mentoring, and usually it's kind of an ethics issue, in my opinion. So basically, I was mentored that way. So
Mm.
my answer would be boutique firm in that aspect. After about 3 years with that smaller firm, I had about 20 listings of my own. I'd started kind of making a name for myself kind of locally. Had been in the paper a few times for different deals I'd done. So it came to the point where I had to look career wise and kind of see, what do I need to do for my career? What's the best thing? Avis and Young in Memphis was a newer firm. They had about 4 or 5 years in the market. Mostly Cushman and CBRE guys that were, well established and great brokers here in the area. But they didn't have a retail, department at all. So I approached them, they hired me on as basically the retail broker. So I was the vice president of retail brokerage, and spent about 6 years at Avison. Grew the
Mm.
department heavily. Mostly strip center, shopping centers. Majority of that was leasing, probably about 75%. But I started focusing a lot on downtown historical buildings for sale, and did that for quite a while. And it was, having the flagship behind you and having behind that your name is always great, because especially when you're dealing with clients that are out of town, if they know the flagship and they know that name, like a CB or a Cushman or a JLL, that's going to help you tremendously. That was something that was good as well. After the 6 years there, I have a colleague that we've partnered together pretty heavily, and there's our local NAI office here is NAI SAG company. Has just been a market dominator in Memphis for years and years. And they, we have the national flagship NAI name, but the company's over 60 years old here and just has been a huge force. So we, had the opportunity to move over, and we did. So it's been, more, my focus is still retail, but the sales side has become more, about 50/50 investment, sales, leasing. So it's been a good transition. So luckily I've been able to see all the different aspects. Once again, to answer your question, if someone's young, right out of college, then if they can find a smaller brokerage that you can really cut your teeth on and you have a mentor, do that. But if you join the big, like CBREs, they're going to teach you also, and they're going to, they're really gonna bring you on. So there's, it depends on, I think, your own situation and kind of where you are, but there's both pros and cons to everything, really.
I would agree. And I think the interesting with that is finding the mentor is absolutely important. But I think sometimes the struggle is that you don't know if they're going to be a good mentor or not, coming in from being brand new. And I think we see that. And I don't want to pick on the big brokerages because, it's easy. I don't want to look like I'm punching up. But I think one of the things you see is, as you promote in the larger brokerages, is expected you become a mentor. Like, that's part of your track. That's part of your responsibility. Where
Mhm.
some of those agents probably should, they're great transaction, but they probably aren't that best mentor to be working with. And I think sometimes you can get yourself caught where it's just not a good mentor. You can say the same thing with a boutique. Hey, I'm way too busy. I need somebody else to come in, but they're a terrible mentor. And I think you see turn in the industry from new agents as well, oftentimes, by just
Sure.
getting a hold of a bad mentor.
Yeah, that's an issue that could happen as well, and it's unfortunate, but At the same time, of course, there are different courses. I know we're both CCIMs, which is, a fantastic organization. That's something I'm really happy that I did. But yeah, that's right. I mean, there's a possibility there's a bad mentor. So, in that situation, I don't really know what someone could do. Try to find another mentor, I guess, would be my kind of answer on it. But yeah, that's something I think that definitely is an issue.
Yeah. So when you've talked about growing brokerage and all that, part of that's taking on new listings, doing that side of it, but other part of it is hiring and recruiting agents, right?
Hmm.
So have you found or have you brought on other veterans that have come into the fold, and have you learned anything about kind of their transition and maybe things they've done well or maybe not so well?
Not really. There's not a lot of veterans actually in the Memphis area
Mm.
that are brokers that are in commercial. There are a few, but it's one thing that I think we really would need to have a lot more of. I had a broker that I hired when I was at Avis and Young that came in. She wasn't a veteran though, but and once again, for my standpoint, and really. I think any one of us that are veterans that are in the real estate industry can attest to is that, we have the work ethic, we have the discipline, we have that, that molding that we had in while we were in the service that just really sets us above, in my opinion. And clients a lot of times see that too. And you talk about getting listings. I mean, a lot of times just seeing that I'm a former Marine, that just people see that and they say, okay, well, he's a Marine. This is, that's helped.
Yeah, and that's interesting, and because I would say I've seen some of the same thing. Oh, you're Army, okay, and there's a little bit of reverence, depending on
Sure.
where you are in the country. There's maybe a little bit of reverence. Oh, wow, they served in the military. They've obviously done something honorable. They've got good qualities that go along with it. I don't know if I can say I have won listings specifically because of being a veteran, but I can definitely say it's helped on
Sure.
that side. In the residential side, we see oftentimes, I mean, it is very, look at me, sergeant major, retired, whatever. You kind of see that really foisted or pushed out there. But in the commercial side, not as much. We're a little more corporate, a little more buttoned up. But do you lead with the fact you're a veteran, or does that really come up in much of your marketing, or is it just something that kind of naturally comes up in conversation, or how do they find out that James used to be Sergeant McCraw years ago?
Well, I lead, I don't lead with that. No,
Uh,
that's a part of something that I think, is an aspect that helps define who I am. But I like to lead from what I've done, and clients that I've helped. And, I believe in, really documenting, what you've done. I think that, I believe in kind of the servant aspect of helping your clients, that the more you work and help your clients achieve their goals, you achieve your own. So I like to lead from kind of, this is who I am. This is what I've done. These are the things I've achieved. Of course, there's different awards that, you get over years of. So those are things that also I like to do. But I believe also in really, standing out on, in ways of LinkedIn, social media. I'm not someone who posts a bunch of stuff on there, but at the same time, I make sure that I do that. And of course, being a retail broker, a lot of times, you do a deal and the paper wants to write about it.
mm,
So what I usually try to do is I send that article or send the story to someone in the paper and they'll write about it and that's helping my client out. Either I'm representing let's say the actual restaurant or maybe the landlord. That's going to make it sound good. They'll mention you too, which is good for you, but it's not
sure.
about you. So, I mention it, I have it, like on my bio and, your website, that kind of thing, because I think it definitely does help, but I'm not, going and saying, hire me because I'm a Marine, that doesn't, but I think it's, once again, it's something that makes you, it's something that you can kind of show to say, look, I'm the real deal because you did go through that and you're able to achieve that.
Yeah. And I think it goes into people want to do business with who they know, like, and trust, right? And if
Mhm.
you're more human, the more you can be human, whether veteran or not, that helps. But I think that, talking about that veteran service, or the military service helps a little. I've always found it interesting how far some people lean into it versus how far people just absolutely shy away.
Yeah.
Where even in our brokerage here on the residential side of our brokerage, we've got a retired full bird colonel, West Point grad. I mean, he's Mr. Military. Most of his business is military. If you look at him, not a single bit of his military service is on there outside of part of his bio is after completing 20 odd years of service in the military. And that's it.
Sure.
Service in the military, not colonel, whatever. Service in the military. I moved into residential real estate and and went from there. Whereas, I think for me, I named my company, Cross Sabers, which military folks get that pretty quickly. They grab it, but most civilians don't. And, I was a little subtle with it, where again, you have others who just, I mean, it's a picture of them still in uniform from 25 years ago. And you're like, that's the opposite side. And I've always found it interesting how far people lean into that as well. And if they find that a good chunk of their business really does come from, other veterans.
Oh yeah, I'm glad you kind of brought that up, and you kind of mentioned it, a few minutes ago. But people are going to hire who they know and trust.
Mhm.
And going back to the beginning of our conversation, the one thing about being in the military is that you have that camaraderie with other people. We talked about fraternities, but one thing that's been really helpful to me is I've joined a lot of different organizations and historical organizations or more civic organizations. And, your experience in the military is going to help you in there because, especially if you're in a leadership position, like our CCIM chapter, for instance, is of course, that's more of a business oriented thing. But, like I joined the Sons of the American Revolution. I was a president a couple of years ago. Those are a lot of people that are kind of outside the military, but you also have your military organizations that people join too. Of course, the Marine Corps League is one for Marines, but there's a couple other ones I can't think of right now that are more general, military veteran.
Yeah,
But those are,
and stuff like that. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. So those are things that, people can join. Of course, the Rotary is good, but, people are going to want to hire who they know. And, us as people that are, prior military, we're used to being and working with people and collaborating. We're also, taught how to lead. So, I've always believed anything that you do, you kind of jump and go head in, so that's for me has helped out tremendously because you never know who you're going to meet or who you're going to pick up or anything because, but you ask my wife, I don't think I've had dinner at home in like, I don't know how long after all these organizations I belong to, but I let her know, like this is, a business comes from this, and that really is not the reason why you join these things. You join because you enjoy them, but it's just a natural progression of what's going to come in. And that also, I think, gives a veterans kind of leg up because they're already used to this.
So I want to key on something you said that you don't join these organizations to get business, but it just kind of comes from it.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times that's when, you start trying to build your business. Some of the coaching out there is go get involved in the community, go be around, you're going to get business from it. How do you balance not walking in with commission breath, trying to get the sale? Because if you're spending your time, you want to have some type of ROI on it as well. How do you balance being a servant, being involved in something, but knowing that likely, your next paycheck could come from being around these organizations?
Sure. I mean, I think I think that you always, let people know what you do. I know that, of course, you look back 1,000 years ago, people that have last name Smith that came from what they actually do. You don't.
Sure.
I mean, don't go in and start trying to sell everybody everything. And that also, like I said, should be why you really join. You should join to enjoy it. It's just kind of a natural kind of aspect of it. But I think you get in, you meet people, and you get involved. You get in leadership positions. People can always sniff out when someone's coming in trying to, not being, not really, joining because they enjoy it, joining to try to make money. And that's, I think that, people are naturally going to trust you once they get to know you. and you make friends, and you can help them out, and then they can help you out also, that kind of aspect. So of course, someone else would have a different business, and you go to their business and help them out. But for me, that's just being someone that joins these things has just helped me tremendously. But I've helped people out too, so it all kind of equals out.
Yeah, and it sounds like you're coming at this with a mindset of abundance. Hey, if we all grow, we're all growing together. We all win together. And I think that's such a military mindset coming in from as well. So I remember early on when I started off, there was a Marine. He was a Mustang. He graduated, decided he's going to get into real estate. He graduated like a semester before I did. We didn't know each other that well, but we got to know each other kind of post graduation. So as we're both out there growing and building, we'd get together for lunch, once every 3 or 4 months, and we compare notes. Who's doing
Mm-hmm.
what? And we raced. Who was going to be a CCIM first? Well, I beat him. Who's going to be a broker first? Well, he beat me. And there was so many times that we both were just fiercely, I'm not going to let this jarhead beat me. I'm not going to let this soldier do whatever. We were so competitive, but yet so free with, hey, what are you doing to get this? How'd you get this traction on this marketing? Oh, man,
Right.
I'm doing this, doing that. And it's such a way of abundance. I was competing against him, yes, but I didn't want him to lose. And I think that's such a military mindset that even outside in other organizations, I think you see a lot of the same things. Have you run across similar situations or that abundance mindset that's kind of built those relationships even deeper than what they probably naturally would have gone?
Not so much in commercial real estate, but I like that though. I mean, it's the iron sharpens iron, kind of
Exactly. Yeah.
statement. Yeah, and I think that's one thing also that as veterans really, kind of you have that friendly competition.
Mhm.
Everybody wins. We're on the same team. However, we're gonna, kind of see how we can work to, best degree for the best of both of us. So I think that's a really good way that people can kind of take a look if they have that opportunity.
Yeah.
I wish I had that, to be totally honest, because if I had someone that I can kind of, I could kind of be a friendly competition type person, that I'm just going to be a better person, a better broker, and a better, just a better, just
Yeah.
servant.
So you talk about commercial being a little more difficult to get into and all that. Has there been any education that by all means, like you should do right away for the very beginning, or maybe some things that you have done and wish you did a bit of it later on? Was there been any education that you would absolutely look at and say, hey, this is a must do, or this is a must do early and this is later on?
CCIM, absolutely. I
Okay.
mean, CCIM, introduction to real estate when you first get in any of the classes. When I first came into commercial real estate, I just read as many books as I could.
Mhm.
The Rod Massimo books. I ordered everything on Amazon and just really, just went all into it. But I was looking, and I'd see people that I respected that were CCIMs and brokers, and I would see somebody and say, I want to be like that one day. I want to be, I want to be that broker. But they were all CCIMs.
Mm.
So I took 101. I guess I've been a broker for about a year, maybe. I took 101 and just loved it. 102, I took that right after, and also that was just amazing. It was tough, but it was just so much information. Pandemic happened. I really didn't, do anything for a while, because I'm more of I'm a Marine. I got to, be in class. I'm not, we're not the sharpest tools, but no. So I waited until after, think classes kind of started back. And it's kind of funny. I just, said I really got to finish this up. So I did 103 and 104 within a couple of months,
Mm.
and then took the test. And I had a few years between 101 and 102, and then 103 and 104, and was just pinned actually last year. So pretty much a
Oh.
brand new designee. But the chapter, had already, they knew I was coming up. So I'm the president elect for next year. So I'll be the chapter president in 27. Which is great. So we in fact we had our installation yesterday. So anyone
Nice.
getting in CCIM, do it. Read as many books as you can. Just knowledge is power. So that's just gonna get you a leg up over everyone else. Because once again, if you can find the right mentor, for any questions you have, that's a good thing too.
Yeah. And I'll say, at least for me personally, with CCIM and leadership, that was one of the better things I've done as well. The CCIM education was great, but like you, as soon as you got pinned, they're like, hey, you should join a committee. You should get involved in this. And it was kind of the same thing, shortly after I got pinned, I found myself as a chapter president. And what I will say, I think it helps so well is that very quickly, especially in a crowded market, you're in front of the crowd, you're in front of the luncheon, you're out there, you're speaking, there's a lot of things that builds very quickly for you that you're now seen. People know who you are. They know your name. They may not know you personally, but they know your name. And I think from a branding perspective, not that you should do it just for branding, but I think one of the outcrops of serving those ways is the branding. People know who you are. We had a guy, John Galindo, who kind of did the same thing. I was president the year he got pinned, and I was like, hey, congratulations, you're doing this. And he's now moved up, and he was last year's president, but he's kind of given the same story. He's like, wow, like everybody knows who I am. Like everybody in town knows who he is at this point because of serving in those positions, which has just helped tremendously, as he's kind of trying to grow his business.
Yeah, and also as military veterans, once again, that leadership aspect. You're finding we both found ourselves as the presidents. And this is more of a broad real estate aspect too, but not just commercial, but of course, area realtors. Us in Memphis, and I don't think it's like this the rest of the country, but we have a very strong commercial council. And in fact, we do so, and I'm the incoming president for next year. So I'll be the president of the commercial council and then the president of CCIM. So I have 2 years that are pretty busy. I know, but they got me. But so we basically, most brokerages are a member of our commercial council. We have what's called Pinnacle Awards, which is awards that broker of the year, the top 25 brokers. We have a new broker. We also have a golf tournament that we've raised over $1 million now for Make-A-Wish. On top of that, we have like a forecast summit where we have national speakers come. And we're really an advocacy group for the commercial real estate industry, in the Memphis area for our commercial council. So, and it's a good way that we also meet other brokers because I'm more of a retail guy. I don't do a lot of office or industrial, but I get a chance to meet maybe someone at CB or JLL or some other company that is more of an industrial person. We become friends and they start referring business over, and vice versa. And I think just community is so important in real estate. Commercially, there's less commercial brokers. So especially it's in Memphis, where secondary market is not as cutthroat at all. You really can't be that way. You shouldn't be anyway, but you really can't because it's just a small group and you're going to get ostracized if you do. So we have to really kind of work as a team. And that's one thing also that I think is so important is, getting out there in your profession and, join RPAC or join something if you're more residential that could help out, get your name out there. And those things I think are important. And as military veterans that, we already have the leadership to really assist those organizations, and plus it's good for us too. So
Yeah. No, and even I think that's one of the things in commercial specifically, and I imagine Memphis is the same thing. San Antonio, a little bit of a bigger market, but at the end of the day, there's maybe 800 of us in the market. Like you relatively know, especially when you get to the people that are actually closing deals on a regular basis. It's a phone call or two for me to find out all the dirt, whatever I want to find out. I mean, you could find out quite a bit. Your reputation goes quickly. I'd imagine Memphis, you guys are the same way. If you quickly get a reputation for just being a jerk or being a little unethical, like everybody knows, and they start to steer clear of you real quickly.
Yeah, that's right. So it's good to get out and meet other brokers. And, I have people that are other retail brokers that have become good friends, another CCIM. He was president of the chapter in Memphis a few years ago. He's one of my competitors when it comes to retail, but I spent Thanksgiving at his house with my wife. We were
Mm.
friends. So that's just so important, as well, because, you should always do the right thing and be the best person you can. But at the same time, that should extend also to your colleagues and your competitors.
So as we start to wrap up, one of the last questions we typically ask is, looking back at your journey, looking back at your transition, is there anything that you would have done differently, or maybe a lesson that you wish you didn't learn the hard way or as hard as you did? That way that next service member who's getting ready to make that same transition doesn't make the same mistakes you did.
Yeah, I would have finished CCIM sooner if I could. To be totally honest, I can't tell you how much I love that organization. It really is. And of course, I'm preaching to the choir, but it really is such a good thing, and for a commercial person that helps out. So yeah, that's it.
Yeah, no, I can say, CCI was great for my career as well. And it's always great to be able to pick up the phone. Cause I know when you and I, met was there in Chicago, and it was very quickly, you're CCI, you are too. Oh, wait, veteran. It was just instant, like, all right, we're going to get along. It was that quick that we started chatting. And I think that's the awesome part of just the value of the PIN, the value of CCIM, and really any organization. I see the same thing within IREM as well, that it's an instant credibility. It's a third party saying these people know what they're talking about. They've got some level of credentialing that says they should. Not every CCIM is the best, but when you get out there, somebody's already said these people are good. They've got a level of knowledge and expertise. You should be in good hands with it. That's such a great opportunity, especially from camaraderie. If I had a question, on Memphis, you'd be the person I'd call. Hey, we're looking at it. Who should I send this referral to? Because of those relationships.
Absolutely.
So, well, James, thank you so much for your time and being willing to share. If any of our guests or our listeners, had any questions they wanted to reach out to you, what's the best way that they can find you? Is it social media, or what's the best way for them?
Yeah, just on social media, LinkedIn probably.
Okay.
Just James H. McCraw. And they can email me if they want as well, J. McCraw. That's MCCRAW @sagcompany.com.
All right. Well, James, thank you so much for your time. And for the listeners, if you found value in this, feel free to give us a like or a comment, or share it to somebody else who would find value in this. Again, the stories are all real. We didn't script any of this. It was kind of off the cuff. But feel free to share this as well. And James, again, thank you so much for your time and being willing to share your story.
Yeah, thanks for having me.